Okay, guys, so now I'm back. I just simply want to now I want to basically create the schema that will be the object that gets passed into Mongo, and basically, I didn't name it, so it'll be models like that. And basically, control backtick to open and close the terminal. I haven't said that already. So inside of models, you can use touch as well, but inside of models, I just simply want to just create one called customer with a capital letter. Um, And basically, you can be a lowercase letter too, but I like to basically do that because it's like an object. And so basically here, I just want to bring in Mongoose again because that's what we're using to connect to Mongo. Alright, so I want to create a schema, and basically this will be a new Mongoose schema, which is what you use to basically create a schematic or like a design for what you want each object to be. So this takes in some options as well, basically a definition. And so what we want to put in here is just any fields that we want to be recognized by Mongo. And so the name field is one of the fields we want, because basically this customer is basically a user. And so basically it'll be a type string. You can also do a default, max length. Like there's many different things you can do when defining this. We just want it to be required of true because we want this to be in here. And basically I'm gonna copy this and do this for the email and password because we want those fields as well when we register a user. Um, we can also put a flag like is admin if they're an admin and things like that. And you can log other stuff here as well. But for this project, we'll just be doing a simple design. So all of these are type strings and required to true. And then basically we want the post, which is just any post that they basically upload, and it's an array, and so we want to use array. And then inside of there, we also want to use an object because we're defining each object. And so inside of here, it'll simply be the post ID, which should be a number like that. And then we want the post title. You can also make this a nested object. You can do like that as well. I think Mongo supports up to 100 levels of nesting. So you can definitely nest that if you wanted to with other stuff. And then it'll be a type of string as well. Post body. The reason why I'm not putting required here is because we're going to require it on the front end. So we don't have to require it back here. This will also be a string. And then we want basically post updated at, which is whenever it's updated, and it'll be a type of date. And then post created at, and that'll be a type of date as well. And so that'll be what we do for each object. I put this on a separate line so you just see it a little bit better. So basically it'll be a list, and each object inside of that list will have these fields here, like that. And so each object, anonymous object, is a post, and each post basically has all of these fields here. And that's basically how that will work. And you can also name this something like post, and then you can like put all of the fields in there like that as well. And so you can do like post like that, and then now like you can basically, oops. Oh wait, oh no, you can't do that because it's in an array. But if you want to like basically make this an object that consisted of an array, and you name the array post, and then you want to name it something else, you can do that. But basically, this is fine the way we have it. And then we also want to create it at for the user when the user was created. Um, and basically that'll be an object, and that's simply going to be of type string, type date, and then simply we can do defaults as well, and so that way we don't have to do it ourselves. And this will just be a date dot now, like that. And so now this is basically our entire schema. So before we can actually use the schema, we have to create a model from the schema, which is why I named this models, because basically this is the model view controller type of setup. So our routes are basically our views, our models is any objects that we're passing to the database, and then our controller would be like any files that where you want to put the methods for dealing with the routes, or you can put them inside of the routes. Either way is fine. For this application, because it's so small, I'll put it inside of the routes, but you can make the functions and do that as well. And so basically, module.exports is equal to mongoose model. Sorry about that. And so basically, it'll be customer, which is what we want to name it, and then the schema that we just created. And so we export that. And so now we have it and we can use it in any other file. We can close this now. And so next I want to basically just create a routes folder. This is basically where we'll be having the routes so that when we call the routes on the front end, we'll be able to actually understand those routes on the back end and do something with it. All right. Um, And so basically, the back end and the front end are two separate apps. So basically, you can they don't even have to be in the same folder. You can create you can call the routes in another folder on another computer system, and as long as another computer system is running the actual MongoDB, um, basically the backend script, if it's not already in my like deployed, then you basically should still be able to successfully use both sides. And so that's really cool when you think about it. And so inside of here, I just want to do auth.js for the authentication route, basically login register. And I also want to do another one so you can right click and do new file. And I can do post.js, which is the like route that we use for any like post. And these routes will have to be authenticated in order to work. Otherwise, we will return a 401 saying it's unauthorized. And so basically, inside of our auth.js, I simply want to bring in express and then instantiate an express router object. So I want to do const express equal to require express, and then const router is equal to require, or not require, express dot router. You have to instantiate it like that. And then right below here, we can just do module.exports is equal to router. And the reason why we do that is because that way we can use this router that we made inside of our entry point file in order to actually, so we don't have to use app.get or use all the routes in our entry point, and we can separate them into folders. That's how you want to do that. We can just put that same thing in here. And so basically inside of our index.js file, our entry point file, we want to bring in those routes. So we'll do const, and I'll just call this auth route, and it'll be required, and it'll simply be /routes /auth. We'll do the same thing for the post route. Require /routes/post like that. And so now down here we want to basically bring them in. You can put them anywhere. I'll put them here. So app.use, and then basically we want to pass in the path, which we don't have to put on like localhost http://localhost:5000. We can start with whatever we want to basically use this when we append it onto our domain name. And so I'm just going to use /API because it's a backend route, and then slash and then auth basically for the auth route. And then I'm going to stop it right there because I'm going to put inside of here, I'm going to use, for instance, I'm going to use like router.post, and then this will be basically it'll be like basically a register or login, And the reason why you don't have to use API/API/off is because you did it here, so you don't want to do it twice. Otherwise, it'll like put it twice in the URL and then it won't work. And so this will just be the route that we brought in, so it'll be off route like that. And then we're gonna do the same for the post route. So it'll be /API/post or post like that, and then it'll be post route. All right, and so now we basically want to set up the off route. And so if you're using like a function, you could have done like, for instance, exports dot and then function name, whatever you want to name it. This don't have to be function name. It could be function anything. Like you can name it anything. You can name it get post, and you can basically set it equal to whatever you want it to do. If you don't want to pass in the functions here, and each function would have to take a parameter request response and next in order to be used as the middleware here. And basically, if you do that, you'd have to bring it in, use up here, and then basically you would pass in the function here, and basically do it that way. But I'm gonna put the actual controller functions, and I'm gonna just put them in here. And so basically, we'll take a request and a response. We don't call next because this is the last piece of middleware for this route. Basically, we can chain a bunch of functions together. So when we make our off function later, that would have to use next in order for it to actually get to the request response part of the middleware here. Otherwise, it will never get here. So that's important. And so now basically I just want to put a semicolon here. Basically I just want to, and I know there's different linting you can do to where you don't have to put semicolons and stuff. You can get extensions and VS Code, but I'm just going to put it here for robustness and clarity for anybody that's wants me to do that. And basically, that's how I actually want to do it too, because that's how I'm used to doing it. And so basically in here, we want to basically bring everything from the request body, or basically the JSON object that we get from the front end. And so we want to use const. And you can also use let, and basically name, email, password equal to request dot body. Remember, and notice how I didn't do created at, because when we upload it to Mongo, when we save it, it'll automatically do that for us because we have a default there inside of the schema. And so here I just want to do let if we get any errors, and let errors be equal to an empty array. And this is just basically for testing when we want to when we're debugging this, we want to basically see like if we're getting any kind of errors. And so basically I'll append them all on so I can see all the errors at once in the list. And so now we basically want to do simple validation. And another thing you can do with Mongoose actually is, if you don't want to do the validation there, you can actually use something like, for instance, for this schema, you can use schema dot and then pre. And basically any method that you want to do, you can also use post for after the method is done. Pre is basically for before the method is called. So if you call a save method in Mongo, you can pass in basically some middleware, and basically it takes a next, which is like done or done basically, and you simply just do like, you pass in what you want to pass in, and then if it's successful, you use done, and you go to basically save it. And then if it's not done, um, basically it will never actually save it to Mongo. So you can put your pre-hook in here. You can also put any methods that you want to create that aren't already Mongoose methods, and you can put those here and call those as well when you bring it in. Mongoose is very powerful. And so basically, I'm gonna just do it in here though. And basically you can, well, before I do that, let me bring it in. So const customer like that is equal to require, and then that's, because we're actually in the routes folder, we have to go up one folder into the parent folder. And so it'll be dot dot slash, and then we go to models, and then slash what we named it, which was customer. And so now we want to do for our validation, we just simply want to do name, if not name, and then like if not email, and then if not password, and then basically we want to if basically if one of these fields aren't filled out, um, no pun intended, we basically want to push on an error, and so we please enter all fields. And because all of these are basically user errors, this will all be a 400 status, which means a bad request. So I don't have to put it like a status thing here of like append to object, because I'm just gonna, if any errors, I'm just gonna append the entire list with the status of 400. And so basically, we're gonna do if name.length is, for instance, greater than 60 characters. That's, we can basically do errors.push, and then we push on another error. And you can skip ahead because a lot of this is just going to be redundant, me just for doing the validation. I should be done in about 2 minutes maybe. Too large, it must be less than 60 characters. And then if name. And then once you do this kind of stuff, you want to have like snippet files, either in like text files inside of a folder on your computer, or like maybe like a private Git repository or something that you have all this in, so that you don't have to do this every time, because a lot of this will be the same if you consider what they call what basically coders call boilerplate. And so basically you don't want to waste your time doing boilerplate once you understand how it works and how to do it. And just basically you can just download a starter project, like a meme starter project or a MERN starter, and then change what you need to change. And it'll be a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. And basically it just saves you time. And so basically, let's see here. I'm gonna do the same thing for email. So I'm just copy the name part here. And I'm going to change this to email. And I'm going to change the, oh wait, that's name. This one here should be email. You can also do this, and then you can control D, which will copy the next one down, and then you can change both of them at once like that. That's pretty cool. And basically, I also want to add another validation of email that includes, just to simply make sure it includes at. Now you want to basically pass in like reject strings to validate the email, but I'm just simply just a simple demonstration project, so I'm just going to do it this way. But this is not the way you would want to do it for production. So this would be invalid email. And so now once we do all of our validation checks, we just simply want to call that schema that we brought in. And we simply want to use find one. And what we want to basically do is check to see if the email already exists. And so what we want to do is customer find one. And so basically you can pass in the conditions, and I'm just going to do email, and then with ES6 you can just simply do email if the field and key are the exact same. And then basically it returns a thinnable. I meant thinnable, and basically then and then catch. You can also use async await as well. If we get an error, we just want to log the error. And so inside of our then, we should get the user if there is one. If there's not one, we shouldn't get a user. And so basically, if there is a user, we want to basically append another error, because there shouldn't be, if they're registering with that email. And so the error is that push, and then email already exists. And then if there's any errors, basically errors.size is greater than 0. we just simply want to return. We want to basically not do anything here, or basically anything below this if statement. So we want to get out of here, get out of the route endpoint that we're in, and we just want to return the status of 400, which means a bad user request, and we want to append some JSON to it, and we'll just simply do message and basically the errors, which will basically send back that list of errors. And with .json, it already automatically stringifies it for you, so you don't have to use um, JSON stringify for that. And so let me see down here. I just want to do so if it's successful and there's no errors. Now I want to basically hash the plain text password because I don't want a plain text password in a database for security reasons. And so I want to bring in bcrypt.js, which I forgot to do. So that'll be bcrypt. You can call it bcrypt.js as well. And basically it'll be require bcrypt.js. Oops. And here I just simply want to generate a sort, which will be used to hash it. And so you want to use bcrypt.js.gensort like that. And basically, when you generate the sort, you can choose the number of rounds. By default, it's 10, like here. And the number of rounds basically is the number of times it gets encrypted, I guess. And so I'm going to just use the default of 10. You can also pass it in. And then it takes a callback. I tried this with a promise using a then syntax, but it didn't work. So make sure you use a callback when you're using bcrypt, just to avoid errors. And then we'll do, so inside of here, we want to basically, if there's an error, we want to like throw the error so that we know that there's an error. And then basically we want to encrypt the password. So we'll do bcrypt.js dot hash, which is what we use the sort for. You can see it takes in the string of the password, the sort, or a number if you didn't actually create a sort yet, and then it basically returns a promise. And you basically can also use a callback here. And so it'll be password, which is what we named it up here. Oh, I didn't do any validation for the password. Let me actually quickly do that. And I want the password to be, I guess, greater than 60. I know greater than 60, that'll be fine. We'll do that. And so basically, back down here, it takes in the password, and then the sort that we just created, which basically is what this is here, and then basically a callback, which it should be an error, and if we get one, and then a hash, which is what we just created. And so inside of here, we just simply want to call that user object again, or the customer object. But first, we want to basically check if there's an error. We want to throw the error. And now we want to call that customer object, but first let's create a new user. So const new user will be equal to new customer. Actually, the reason why I didn't call this user when I was making this was because I was actually making a Mern React app and I was using my same Mongo cluster, and I thought I ran into a problem where I couldn't use the same context basically. So I had to create another project, and I thought that was the reason why I ran into a certain error. But it wasn't. But I named this customer because I originally was doing it in the same cluster for my other project. And so basically, that's why it's customer. You could have named this user whatever you want. And so it'll be name, name, or ES6 just name because it's the same thing. Email, password. So we created a new user. Now we just simply want to pass this to the database after we set the hash password to the password. So set new password to the hash. And basically, this will be new user dot password is going to simply be equal to the hash that we just made to replace the plain text password. And then now save to the database. And in order to do this, we simply call dot save. So a new user, because remember this new user is an instance of the customer object or class schema. And basically this will be dot save, and then it returns a promise, so we can use that then, and we can also do a dot catch. And so if it doesn't work, we can just log the error. You can also do a res dot status of 500 if you want. And so basically here, we just simply want to when it saves it, it returns the actual document. And if you hover over this, you can see it says document there because that's what it returns instead of any. That should say document instead of any. And so basically it returns the document. And if you ever forget like what some of these callbacks take, you can always look and it'll tell you. So if you, for instance, say result, but it's really an error that it returns, then you should be able to see that here and change it. And so now here is where we want to create a new token, because when we authenticate, we want to have a token so that we can authenticate and only allow the user to go to certain routes, basically doing stuff with post if they're authenticated, and if they're not, we return. Oh, sorry about that, guys. We return it status of 401, and so basically this is where we bring in JSON Web Token. And so we want to create a new token. And when you're looking at this stuff, hopefully you have a decent understanding of JavaScript. But with all these different things, it would be crazy to try to just memorize each line. Um, but obviously, like you can memorize it once you do it enough, like because you do it all the time, and so it's very intuitive. You generate the solve, you generate the hash. But when you're learning this, you want to understand the concepts, because the concepts are what's going to allow you to understand this better. Because it's something I used to do in the past. So I try to memorize everything, like when I was doing stuff like Androids, different things. But then when I started to understand concepts, everything made a lot more sense to me. And so I hope that me saying that will help somebody out that might need that. And so basically it'll be const, and I just want to bring it in. I'm gonna call it JWT, and basically it'll be require JSON Web Token like that. And so inside of here, we just want to sign it, which basically creates the token. And so inside of here, it takes a bunch of parameters. The first one is the ID of the token. Now the tokens are 64 base 64 encoded. So there's a function called A to B, which actually you can use to decode it. And basically, you can split the and basically a JSON Web Token, I'll show you in a minute using something called Postman. You can also use curl in a terminal. But basically, I'm going to make requests using Postman. And you can download it, and it should be free to test things out with it. And basically, ATOB basically decodes the base 64, but what it does is you split it up via the dots, because there's three parts to a JSON Web Token. It's the head, the body, and the tail. The body is basically where the data is inside of the token. The head is basically how to identify it and what type it is, like if it's in JSON. And then the tail basically is like, I think, like any expiration date or any options and stuff like that. So basically, one second. Okay. And so basically, here, I just want to do ID, and I want to set it to, remember we made this user um, right here. And so basically, I want to set it to user And basically Mongoose, it has underscore ID instead of just ID. So you want to make sure you do underscore ID there. Basically, the next one is the secret, which is what we made earlier, the JWT secret. This basically when we decode the token. Um, Basically, that secret is going to be used to verify it. So then we also want to set expiration. So you can even have these tokens go forever, but you want to use expires in if you're setting an expiration. And this is in seconds, not milliseconds. So 3600 milliseconds, that's 60 seconds, and then 60 minutes, that's an hour. So we want to do that. And basically, we can do a callback. And that callback is going to consist of, let's see, the error and then the encoded, which is the token. So basically, we can do error and then token like that. And then we just want to do function. And so here we basically want to do, if there's an error, we want to throw it. And then we want to basically create another object because see, we can return the entire user, but we don't want to do that because you don't want to return the password or anything like that. So we can create another object here. We can do token, and we can set it equal to the token. Do ES6, and then the ID. Now this one we have to actually set different because we have underscore ID, and then we want to do user dot underscore ID because they're different. And basically, after we create it, we just simply want to return it. We're not return it, but we want to basically return it as JSON. So we send a status of 200, everything's okay. You can even do a 201 for something was created, I think. And then JSON, and then I'll do, we don't even have to use curly brackets because we already did that. And then new object, because we already did it here with object literal, and then we just pass it in. And we're done. And so that's the register route. Like I said, there's other things you can do as well, but this is just a nice starter for a register route with authentication and stuff. And so now basically we want to do the same thing for login. So we do router dot post request again, and then the path will be slash login. Remember, because we already did. I can go here. We already did slash API slash all. So basically, we just have to append on login just like we did with register. And then we'll do request and response like that. And basically, this might seem like a lot. Once you understand what you're conceptually doing, like it's not that much. Like you'll get the hang of it very quickly. Really quickly, let me just go back over this route. So basically, if we hit the register endpoint, we're taking our request, which is our HTTP protocol request, which is basically we put in headers or whatever we want. Also, we can access parameters. If we put, like, for instance, we want a parameter here like this, then we can do like rec.params dot whatever you named it. Rec.bodies for like JSON and stuff. We can also do rec rec.headers if you want to get certain headers. You can do rec.headers, and then basically we just do that to get whatever header that we want to get. And so there's different things you can do. So basically, we call this endpoint. Let me get rid of that slash. We call this endpoint. We have a callback. If we pass in any middleware, we have a callback here. We grab the name, email, and password from the body or the JSON object. We instantiate an errors list and it's empty, and if there's any errors in the user's request, we basically append on a message. And then here, we basically, if it passes, basically it's going to pass this regardless because I'm not returning anything. And so once we get here, we basically try to see if the email already exists. Because emails are already unique, when somebody creates an email, it should basically check to see if it exists. Um, basically, then we get the user document back. If the user exists, meaning it's not null or it's not undefined, we basically push on another error. And then if errors list is greater than 0, meaning that there is more than 0 elements inside of it, meaning that there's an error, we return a status of 400, meaning bad user request. And then we append on some JSON with the errors in a field called message, and it stringifies it for us. And if there's no errors, then we just basically hash the password, we generate a salt, and then we hash it with the salt. We create a new user, we set it equal to that, and then we just basically um, we basically put the fields that we brought in from the JSON body up here, and then we basically just put them inside of the new user because they're all required based off of our schema here, required for these three. I can close that. And basically here we just we just set the hash to the password, and then we just use .save to basically save it to the database. And then we get the user document again. This time we actually want to set the ID to that ID in Mongo because it'll always be unique. And it generates the ID for us automatically when we save anything. We want to set the secret for the key when it expires and then a callback. So once that's all done, and this is where you want to like put this in a snippet because it's the same thing every time. So to help you out until you can like do it without the snippets, or even if you haven't worked with something in a while, it's good to have snippets so that you can remember it instead of having to go search for it and everything. And it just is a lot more quicker. And so we create a new object because we don't want to return the password. And we set the token, which is what we need to authenticate routes that we deal with in Post.js. And then we return the ID, which is used to tell if the user's logged in or not. And then we just basically just append it as JSON so that we can grab it back on the front end. Then basically we send a status of 200. And then we catch any errors that we have here. So basically that's all we're doing there. Now we can actually grab this entire thing and do it for login and just change a couple of things. So I can basically do, let me see if this works, control dot. Oh, that doesn't work. I know in Android Studio you can use control dot and it'll automatically close up the entire basically block for you, and then you can copy it. But I'm gonna just do it here like this. Just copy everything here, and then I'm just gonna pass it in here. Oops, that. And basically, I just want to change a few things. So basically, when we're logging in, I'll get to that in a minute. First, we clearly don't want to have the name here because when we log in, it'll just be email and password. So we can get rid of the name field here. We can get rid of it here. And basically, let me see. We're not checking to see if the email already exists anymore because we actually want the email to exist. Basically, if it doesn't, then that's when we would want to like do something. And so basically, because we're like checking if it already exists, we don't need to do this anymore. We don't need to push on this error here. And so because of that, we can move this outside of the find one method. And find one is a lot quicker than find. Find will return all of the basically all the documents that contain that email, and it'll just loop through all the documents. Find one, the moment it finds just one, it returns it. And so you want to use find one instead of just find. And let me see. So we got the user here. We basically want to use bcrypt compare instead of generating a salt. And so basically, we're not saving anything to the database. So we just want to take this JWT sign here. We just want to copy that. And then, or yeah, just copy it. And then we want to get rid of this generating of a salt because we're not doing that here. And I'll just leave it there so it's more readable. And so basically we want to just compare. So we want to compare the string password that the user gave us with the hash that's in the database. So it'll be password, which is the string you can see here, and then the hash that's already in the database. And then this returns a promise as well. Um, Now basically then seems to work for the compare method. You can also use a callback if you want. And basically, I guess I'll be consistent and use the callback. So it'll be password and then the user, which is what we just got back, and then dot password, which gets the one from the database. And basically, it'll be a callback, so of error and success. And the error, so I'll just call it a success. And so basically, inside of here, we just want to do um, if error, we want to throw the error. And then what we also want to do is if not success, meaning that if it didn't work, we want to simply return a res.status. Then again, the server technically doesn't have to be down. It could just be that it's not the right one. So we'll do a 400. And basically, it'll be we'll append on some JSON there. It'll be message and password um, is not valid for this email. And so basically, if it is successful, we want to basically create the token again. So we can just do that. And then once we create the token, we now can return our post as well instead of just the ID. Because if they're logged in, they might have posts. So we want to basically be able to return that like that. And then we also want to JSON that object, and we want to return the status of 200. And then now we're done with the login. So it's the same as register. Only difference is we're using find, and we're not actually checking to see if the user exists because we want the user to exist, and then we just compare the password, and then we create the token, just like in the other one. And so now I can test this really quickly. So let me make sure I have my scripts here. So the server script runs node mod. And so inside of here, let me open up Postman really quickly. One second. You can see I was testing all these different routes yesterday and stuff, fixing a few bugs. But basically, you can see I saved a few routes here as well. And actually, I used one of these from my burn stack. Um, I use this actual same like URL, or for the naming convention at least. And so we want to just change this to API off register, and we want to attach on the domain. And so we want to basically, you can do headers, body. For the headers, we want content type of JSON because we're sending a JSON object. Remember, this is why you want to use rec.body because it's JSON and you're grabbing it. And we're able to do this because we use the express.json, which allows us to do that. And so basically, I just set that to name. Make sure you put a comment here as well. Or you'll get an error of you can't read end of JSON something at 20 or whatever. And basically that means that you probably forgot a comma. So basically you want this to be raw because it's JSON's raw JSON. Inside of the headers we have content type application slash JSON. You also have other ones like X www form URL encoded. If you're not doing JSON, you also have multi-part form data. There's many different content types. Image slash JPEG and image slash PNG. There's many of them that you can send inside of the protocol. And so basically, this is the object that we want to send off and register. Make sure that you're running the server here before you do this or it won't work. So we can just use yarn run server, yarn server, npm run server, or npm server, like that. And it should run it, and you should basically see that it connects in development mode on port 5000. And you want to make sure you see this line here. If you don't see this, you obviously won't be able to send anything to MongoDB. So just save you from loads of trouble when I ran into that when I wasn't paying attention. So basically, in here we just want to send it. We should get back the data. So we can send it like this. You can see we get back a token. You can see it's hashed, or basically encrypted token, and the ID. And you can see here it's split by these dots here. And these dots is basically, this is the head of the token, this is the body of the token, and this is the tail of the token. It's split by the dots. And I think the EY at the beginning means Jason, if I'm not mistaken. But so basically that's like the token and what it should look like. And so basically now you can see that it works. And we can also try to log in since we just created the user. So we can go like to log in here. And we can type in the same email. We get rid of the name because we're not passing that in. And we simply, same headers, we use content type application / JSON. And now when we do this, because the expiration date should always be different, because it basically gives you the start point and the end point, because time is always going forward. This ending tail right here should always look different. So when we send this, you see that it looks different and we get a different token. Same ID, we get post of an empty array. So they both work. And so now basically, let me close this. And we can control C to stop the server. And then yes, and clear it. And control back, take to close the terminal. And that's basically how you can test your routes. You can also use, I think you use like curl, and you can like set the headers like this inside of an object of like, content type, like that, and then like application / JSON, and then you could do like the actual route that you're trying to hit. I think I can't quite remember the exact syntax, and then you pass D for data and then whatever the JSON object is in double quotes. But with Postman, it just gives you an actual a GUI or graphic user interface, graphical user interface that allows you to do it a little bit easier. So you can do whatever way you want to test it. It should work either way. And basically, let me see what else I want to do here. I guess I'll make the off route really quick. So I'm gonna call this router dot. I think it should be router dot get. Yep, router dot get, and basically it should be authenticate. You can name whatever you want. And this route is technically used to constantly validate the JSON web token. You can also use JSON, local storage, but it's constantly used to validate it. And so rec requests. We might not need this. I'm not sure. I kind of forgot. Put it in here for right now. And so basically, what this does is we want to pass in the name of the variable required from the user model. And then basically we want to pass in the ID, and then that'll be rec.user.id, which is what we get when we authenticate it. So we do customer find by ID, and then we want to do request.user.id, and we're going to get that basically when we set up the auth function. And so now we just simply want to disregard like the password and everything. And there's another way you can actually do that too. You can do .select like this, and then you can just put in here, and it would be minus password, like that, and it'll basically disregard the password. Um, and also, I forgot, you wouldn't put this here, but if you're using find, and you're not just finding by ID, which finds a single document, and you use like, you can do something like sort, and you can do like whatever you want to sort. Like, so for instance, you can do like email or something, or like for instance, we had created that, and you can do colon, and then you can do -1 for descending and 1 for ascending, like that. And basically that'll just, and actually this should be a string as well as this should also be a string, I think. Um, I'm not quite sure on that one. You can look into that, but basically it'll sort it for you if you wanted to sort it from the database that way. Because everything is done inside of the customer object for me, I don't have to sort anything. And basically we just want to use select on that, and then it returns a promise. And so we can get the user document, and we just simply want to res JSON uh, that user. And we can also append a status as well if we want to, of 200. I guess I'll do that really quick. And then if there's a catch, we can catch it, but this should work. I guess I'll put a catch just for good practice. We'll do error, and we can just console log the error. Okay, so this route should always constantly authenticate. Basically, inside of config, I want to create an auth function. And basically, this auth function is just basically going to get it from the header and basically verify it. So we want to bring in JWT, or JSON Web Token. And I also told you how it was base 64 encoded and how you split it with via the dot, and you could verify it after converting it, verifying certain things like the ID, and then like checking the ID that you basically have. But this way just makes it a lot quicker, I feel like. And so basically you can just set a function called auth. You can just set it equal to request response and next. And this is big, and the reason why we're doing that is because this is express middleware. I showed you earlier how you can chain multiple middleware functions together, and that's basically what you would be doing here. So we basically want to verify the JSON Web Token that is passed from the request object. So basically, because it's stateless, you have to do that. So basically, it's be request response, request response. So it'll always be passing via the request, or it'll be returning the response. And what it also does is it basically returns the ID. It's not in the response, but it's in the request. And the reason being is because it's going to be inside of our Angular app. You can use local storage on it, and basically, or you can basically pass it in each component that's inside of that's not inside of the main component. Oh, sorry about that. And basically, um, it'll basically always send it in when we append it to the headers, and so it'll always be able to be verified. And so it'll be const token, which is what we're getting from the header. It'll be rec.header, not headers. I think earlier I said headers. It should just be header because we're getting 1. You can see we had a different, like we have name, the field, and the value. For this, we just want X off. You can name this whatever you want, but I'm gonna do X off token, and basically, this just basically retrieves it. And then we want to do if not token, meaning that it's undefined or it didn't get retrieved. We basically want to res.status 401, meaning they're unauthorized because they didn't log in or sign or register. And we want to append some JSON to that of message unauthorized access. And then we want to do else. We want to use a try catch block. And inside of here, we just simply want to do const decoded, which is basically because we're decoding the JWT token. I can also say decoded token. This will be jwt.verify, and then it'll be basically the token, and then basically the secret key, which you can see here is telling us that we want the key. And so basically it'll be processed once again .env jwt underscore secret. And then once we get that decoded token, we just want to set we can basically set any variables we want to the request object. We want to set rec.user, set it equal to decoded like that. And if we go back to off.js, you can see down here is rec.user. Let me see here. Is rec.user.id, because rec.user is an object, and so the ID is basically that right here when we set the ID to the token. So basically, when we set this token rec.user to basically the decoded token, we should be basically use .id to get the ID, and we use that to find it, and then we basically return it. And if we don't get this return, then that means that the routes wasn't authenticated, meaning that the user must have not logged in or signed in. That's just for security reasons. And then we also remember it's express middleware, so we want to pass next like that. If we don't do that, it will never basically go to whatever route that we want it to go to. And so that's very important that we do that. Otherwise, this will never get hit. It'll just stop right here. And so if there's any like errors, we just want to res.status 400, meaning it must have been a bad basically a bad request by the user because of when they tried to log in or whatever, basically the token couldn't be found. That was created when they logged in, meaning they didn't log in. So we'll just do a message token not found like that, and we should be good. Obviously, we want to export it. Don't forget to do that. And so now we basically can use this auth function when we bring it in from config, and we can use it on any route inside of the post route or wherever you want to use it at. And so you can close this one up. And now I guess I'll just finish up the back end. And so I'll just do the post route now. And if you're uploading this to a Git repository, I almost forgot to mention, you should want to use a git ignore file, so we can just do a new file. You want to name this .git ignore, and you can see the symbol changes there. And that's a VS Code extension that gives you all the beautiful symbols here and all that. So we can do underscore node modules, because when they download this from a Git repository, if you're uploading it there, basically they can ignore the node modules so that they have to download them on their system if you don't care about the version changing. The yarn lock though, I think the version shouldn't change. And on top of that, it gets rid of some of the bloat that will be inside of a repository. And also you want to get rid of your environment variables, because those are kind of hidden to you, and you don't want anybody to be able to use your database or something like that. So it'd be config / config.env. And so in here we basically want to create the routes for the post request. So it'll be const auth is equal to require config auth, which is what we just created. And that's just our function for authenticating the token, because all these routes are going to be authenticated. And then the customer object, which is our Mongoose schema. And so this is going to be models, because remember we're in the routes folder, so we have to go to the parent directory and customer. And so now we just want to do some different routes here. So first is going to be router get, and that's going to be used to basically retrieve the all of the posts. And so we'll do retrieve, and then we want to pass in a parameter, which is what we need in order to get the right users post, and we'll pass that in from the client side. And basically, we want to pass in the auth function to validate the token using that user ID. And then we want to basically, or not the token, the user ID's token should actually, the user ID should be inside of the token when we verify it. But this user ID parameter field is used for like retrieving the post that we'll do in here or in a controller folder or something like that. And then we want to pass in the callback of request and response. And so inside of here, we just simply want to let ID be equal to rec. Remember rec.params. Whatever we named it, so the user ID. And then we simply want to use customer.find by ID. And then we simply want to do pass in the ID and then returns a then. So then we simply want to do something and then catch. If we get an error, we want to log it. And so inside of here, we just want to get the user document back, and we just simply want to set a new array. Now, there's many different ways you can do this. You can set a new array to it, and you can actually you can like basically do it that way, or you can use Mongo. Basically, you can use push, which basically is recognized by Mongo. You also have pull. Oops. You also have pull, which basically pulls something from an array and push adds it on. You also have element match, which is used to match something that's inside of an array. Basically any field that you have inside of an anonymous function, it'll match it. And so that's another thing you can do, but you don't want to use let for that. I was just showing you the different ones. So basically what you want to do is you can use find by ID and update if you want, or you can use find by ID and then update it manually. But here we're basically retrieving it, so we don't have to actually use that here. But when we add it, when we add a post, we want to definitely use those variables or those fields pretty much. And so basically here we just want to retrieve it. So we'll do user, and we want to do let new array. Yeah, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm thinking about the add route. And then let temp array. And then new array for each. And you just simply want to pass in the post. And so inside of here, we just simply want to, if the post is not equal to null, just for basically error checking. Oops. If the post is not equal to null, we just simply want to, what did I do here? I did customer.find by ID, and then post underscore ID. Now this might not work because I'm actually trying to figure out like why like for some reason I'm not getting any data back. So this part here I would have to look into, but this should be the only part that might not work. The rest of it does for sure because I already tested it. And so we want to do object here because we get the object back obviously, because we want to basically pull it from the database, but we don't want to remove it from the array that we're getting. So for each one we want to find it, and then we want to just basically we want to take the object and we want to append it to an array. And then we also want to do a catch if we get an error. And actually, they create object ID in Mongo for the anonymous functions. So you want to use toString to basically, because it's wrapped by something called object underscore ID or object ID. And so you want to basically remove that by using .toString. And so for the post underscore ID field, which is what it's equal to, you want to use .toString like that, I think. and that should basically convert that to a string. And basically for each object, you want to just console log it to test. And then you simply want to add it to the array. And you can either do push or you can do unshift. But I think it goes to where the ones on, wait. I think it's the ones on top in Mongo are the ones that are first. I'm not exactly sure. It might be the opposite. So you can use unshift as well to add it to the beginning if you want. And basically, that should be it for that. And so that's the retrieve route, and it's protected by our auth function. And so now we want to do the same thing for our add route, and we're going to have a delete route and then the delete all route. And so let me put some comments up here just to so this makes sense. So this will basically be endpoint that gets hit to retrieve all of the user's posts. And then here I'm going to do endpoint that gets hit when the user adds a post. And I'm going to do endpoint that gets hit when a user deletes a post, and then endpoint that gets hit when a user deletes. And then I don't know why I said a user, the user. When the user deletes, when the user wants to delete every post, like that. And so here we just simply want to for the delete request, or wait, just the add. So for the add request, we just simply want to do router.post and just append on add like that. And wait, let me make sure. Yeah, I did post. Alright. So you just want to append on add and then that parameter again of user ID, the all function, and then a request and a response. And so basically here we just want to let ID be equal to the rec.params again. And then we can also do post. We'll let post, which is what we're retrieving from the front end via JSON. Then we want to do rec.body, and it should be .post. You can name that whatever you want on the front end. And then customer.findById, pass in the ID, and then we .then, and inside of here we retrieve the document. And I simply want to just console log some more stuff. So if user.post.length is greater than 0, meaning there's posts, we want to just console log the user. We want to console.log posts. Well, actually, I'm not going to do that. The ID, and then it takes the update, which is the update conditions, which is the object literal, and then any callback, which basically the response, and then the error if there is one. And so basically, I want to pass in, because we can update it strictly like this. So what we can do is, once we find by the ID, we can just do push, and then we can basically set it to what we want to push it onto, and it'll be post, because that's what we named it in the customer schema here for the array of posts. and it should be formatted like this. It's not required, but it should be formatted. It'll be required on the front end. And basically what we do is we just pass in what we want to append to it, and that'll be post. And that actually works. And so then we can do a callback if we want, or we can basically do a then, and we just return the user. Then promises only return one thing. I'm using a then here. And basically, because we already appended it on the front end, we don't really have to return any post or anything like that. We can basically, I guess we could say res.status of 200. And we can just say JSON message success. And then if there's a catch, we want to log it. And so that's basically our add method. You can see how quick that was because of this variable here, which adds it on. See? So basically, that's very useful. And so now the delete route, this should be also a post request because we're sending it as a post request from Angular and not a delete request. So we want to make sure that's post. And then we want to use delete. And then we also want to append on that user ID again. All function request response. And then so inside of here, we want to simply, we want to set the ID again. We got params.user ID. And we want to do, so for this one, in order to remove the right post from the array, I decided to use the created at since that'll always be unique. Since they only can create one post at once. And on top of that, the created at should never change. Updated at is what changes, but the created at shouldn't. And updated at would be if you wanted to add functionality like editing a post. The created at should never change. So that's why I wanted to use that. So let created at and set that equal to rec dot body dot created at. You can also destructure it and just use rec dot body. I forgot to mention that earlier. And simply what you want to do is you want to find my ID and update. Now what I basically did was I did it where I used user.post, which is what I named it in the schema, and I used .filter and just returned everything where it created that wasn't equal to it. But with that variable that I mentioned earlier, you can just simply do customer find by ID and update. You don't want to remove because what that'll do is it'll remove the entire user object, but you only want to change a field inside the user object, which is the post field, plural. And so basically you want to use update still. And it's going to be the ID that we got from the URL. And then we wanted the update conditions, which basically this time instead of push, we're pulling like that. And then where it'll be post, and then we just want to do, we just want to append on created at, I think is what I called it. Let me check. And we basically want to do that, and we want to basically set it to created at like that. And then it returns it then, which is basically just returns the user, but we don't need to return the user. And basically, we just want to do res.status of 200. Returns the user, just making sure there. And then we want to use JSON and we just message success. You can do whatever you want here. Then we want to do that catch. Oh wait, not there. That catch. There's an error. And then we want to do one for the delete all. And so basically for this one, we want to do router.post again, and then this will just simply be a route of /delete all. We want to append on the user ID again for the param, our auth function, and then our callback. Question and response. This is on side of here. I simply want to do let ID be equal to reg.params.id. I want to do customer. I want to do find by ID and update again. Remember that inside of DB, you want this find and modify to be false, otherwise you'll get a deprecated warning. And inside of here, I just want to do the ID, pass that in. And so this time, instead of doing that, we can use, there might be another method for that, like maybe something like delete. I'm not really sure about that. So I'm just going to do it this way, where we just take the post inside of that object and we just set it to an empty array. And then basically we're overriding that to an empty array. And then we want to basically set new to true. If you want to like return, or you want to save it after the changes have been made, I forgot to do that. You want to set that to true like that. If you're saving any changes to the document after they've been updated and not before, if you set that to false, it'll save it before it's been updated for whatever reason. I'm not sure whether that's useful, but it's most likely a reason why. Maybe for security. And here it returns the user. But we don't need the user. We just simply want to do res status 200 and then .json message success. And then .catch console.log here. Alright, and so I actually need to put that up here as well. I forgot to do that. So we want to set new to true to save it after the updates have been done. We want to do that here as well. Alright, and so that's basically our entire post route. And those are all our routes for this project. So you can see here, and now obviously there's going to be more routes like the about page, the home page, and then the dashboard route. But those are going to be on the client side, and because those aren't API routes, or basically backend routes, we don't have to put them here. So basically that's all we need to do.